tuning in to another episode of There Is Another Way podcast, streaming to you live on Facebook. Today, we are super excited to be joined by Emma Matthews, and we are going to introduce her in just a second as I and Alvaro set up the Facebook live stream just to make sure it's working perfectly for you so that as many of you as possible can hear Emma's fantastic story and exactly what she offers and how she can help you have a much better life. So we are live on Facebook. So today on There Is Another Way, we are super excited to be joined by my new friend in business, Emma Matthews. Emma, for the sake of our audience, well, first of all, thank you for joining us. And for the sake of our audience, it would be fantastic if you could introduce yourself to them.
Sure. And Olivia and Alvaro, thanks so much for inviting me. I love conversations like this, so it's an honour to be here. To introduce myself, I'm a bit of a recovering workaholic, I would say. So I had a long career in financial services, got to a really senior level, and then managed to completely burn myself out with not realising that that was coming. And that moment just completely changed my life. And I burnt out to the degree that I was super sick for about 6 months and really just realised that going back into that environment, I'd be likely to relapse. So that for me was really the moment that I looked at the entrepreneurial world and I thought, this is my opportunity to try something new. At that stage, I actually went into sales, which lots of people found crazy because they wouldn't necessarily associate with me with sales, but I just loved the fact that it was a way to have conversations with people who were considering doing things to change their lives. So I supported a lot of entrepreneurs with coaching programs, for example, and did the discovery calls. Then typical me, grew that into an agency that became very big, very global, and noticed that I was having another burnout relapse. So put the brakes on that, sold off the agency. And then I spent about a year doing copywriting. But that whole time, I just had this nagging voice as the pandemic was going on that actually there were so many people in the world struggling with burnout. And it was really unfair of me not to share my experiences to help other people. And that's when the call to move into burnout awareness and prevention services came to me. So now I describe myself as a burnout expert and coach.
So tell me about that pretty difficult time, I guess, running up to the point of you actually having to be off work for 6 months. What happened to get you there?
Yeah, I think with the benefit of hindsight, it probably was building for about a year. So I can track it back to having a horrendous cycle accident. So I was doing a charity bike race with work and managed to just completely skid going around a corner, fell off my bike, knocked myself out, woke up in hospital about 12 hours later thinking, what happened? But I was very fortunate. I was wearing a helmet, so there was no long-term damage, but I had concussion that was ongoing for about 6 months. So that, I think, was the start of just my mental capacity being a bit reduced. So I had a little bit of time off, probably not as much as I needed, because in those days, very much it was pull up your socks, get back to work. And I was in a really senior role at the time, so there was lots to do. So went back into the office, and I think things just started to feel a bit different. Some of my responsibilities changed. I moved to a new role where I was very much trying to prove myself. So what was previously, I don't know, maybe an 8 till 7, I was always doing long days, eventually became a kind of 7 a.m. till midnight. And I didn't really think anything of it because it happened gradually over time. I was existing on caffeine, not really eating properly, all the kind of things that you'd look at now and go, yeah, that is someone who's ticking all the boxes of they're going to burn out. But for me, I didn't see anything coming. I thought, no, I'm invincible. When the going gets tough, you just kind of put more effort in, and nothing's ever beaten me before, so it'll be fine. But of course, all of that stress built up in my body over the course of a year, until one Friday in the afternoon, I just had what I know now is a panic attack. I'd never had one before, so I didn't know what I was experiencing, but it was almost like there was this huge fire in my brain, and every part of me was saying, run, you've got to go, you've got to get out of here. So it was a Friday night. I was running out of our swanky headquarters, just in tears, just not knowing what was going on. And that was the last day that I was in a corporate office. I never went back after that.
Wow. It's crazy, like the way that your body, in a way, that saves you, right? That I guess it was like a panic attack is your body's defense mechanism to be like, you need to stop doing this to yourself now, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very much the case of it had given me lots of signals. So my thinking processes were slower. I was performing probably less productively at work. I was getting snappy, not eating, not sleeping. It was like giving you all these warning signs. You ignored all of them, so I'm going to take you out now. And literally then I was at the stage that I had to just sleep. That was the Friday night. I slept the whole weekend, got up Monday morning still feeling horrendous, but I thought, okay, let's try and work from home. Opened my laptop and literally was just shaking like a leaf and vomited. And I was just like, what is going on? So then the Tuesday, my husband was like, you're going to the doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Sorry, that story really got me. Yeah, wow. Okay.
So what happens? What happens next?
Yeah, so that was then just the start of being in the medical process for about 6 months. So my memory's a little bit blurry, actually. I think the mind's got a way of protecting you from difficult memories. But my doctor's office was near my office. And I remember just going there and just freaking out at there being all these people around, and just was really scared, going into the doctor's office and just cried. And I was never an emotional person, just not someone you would have ever really seen cry. And then I was just sat there sobbing my heart out to a stranger. And the most bizarre thing I remember was given this form where I had to rate things like just how suicidal I was feeling. And it was just so outside of my frame of reference. But I realized there was something seriously wrong. So from there, I was referred to a psychiatrist, which again, that just took me a long time to get my head around why I would be going to see a psychiatrist. And I just remember him saying to me, yeah, you've just pushed yourself too hard. You've gone beyond the limits of what any normal person could expect of themselves. And you've done this over a long period of time. So the amount of time that burnout's been building, that's how long it's going to take you to come out the other side. But actually in those days, burnout wasn't a recognised medical condition. It is now. So at the time, they were talking about things like anxiety and depression. But now the World Health Organization does actually recognise it as a work-based syndrome. So yeah, it was going to see a psychiatrist. Then I was seeing a therapist weekly for cognitive behaviour therapy, and heaps of medication just to stabilise myself to become a functioning person again.
Yeah. And in terms of I guess, in hindsight, again, what would you have done differently, I guess, to prevent yourself going to that? Or even what could the workplace have done? Which is, I think this is the key thing here, right? Because I hear your story, and whilst I think your story is maybe more extreme than others I've heard in terms of where it got to, I myself was signed off sick for 3 months as well due to stress at the end of my corporate career, and I hear it from friends and people like that. But what are kind of those, what would you have done differently, or what could the corporation have done, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's two things. It's down to the individual to say there's an issue, and it's also down to the organisation to create an environment where you can stay well and it's okay to speak up. So taking ownership from my perspective, I should have kind of waved the flag that it was too much. So I moved into a new area. I was trying to do the job of a whole team before the team was in place. And I just assumed that I could do it because I'd always kind of pushed myself in situations and kind of sink or swim. And I'd always swam before, it had been fine. So I definitely should have had more boundaries. I stopped doing some of the things that kept me well. Like I was always a runner. Before that, I was always in the gym. But I cut back all of that to focus on work. And I think another game changer for me was just how reliant I became on caffeine and just really stopped eating properly. So yeah, I definitely should have had some non-negotiables and kept them in place. Also, from an organisation perspective, this I find tricky. I think the difficulty in these situations is quite often the people that you're working directly with, they're in the same situation. So it's not that anyone's deliberately trying to overwork you. It's just there's a systemic issue of too much work for the people. Yeah. So I think it's something that has to be set from the top of the organisation, that work-life balance, mental health is a priority, and that you're in a safe environment where you can speak up when things become too much.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Well, I think companies, at least when we left, no, companies are moving into that direction, right? With the more like.
Yeah, I think it depends as well on the site, like different size organizations and things like that as well. I think it's definitely something that probably needs to, I don't know what the solution is for these kinds of things ever, because sometimes they're so difficult to detect, because as well, like from my experience, I don't know if this is something that you resonate with. I wasn't really, at the time I wasn't feeling really good. I didn't want to share it because I didn't feel comfortable to share it. I didn't feel comfortable with the judgment that might happen, or for my boss to think I was, somewhat weak or something like that. I don't know. That was a personal issue for me. I don't know if that resonates with you.
Yeah, I definitely worked really hard to get to that stage, and I was quite confident in my ability. So I actually think my biggest issue is I just didn't recognize the signs. Yeah. I'd never heard of burnout, and perhaps if I'd been through some sort of mental health awareness program, maybe I'd have gone, oh yeah. That's why I'm so passionate about producing content now, because I try and produce the videos that would have resonated with me and helped me spot that there was an issue in time to do something before it was, you're on medication, you're seeing a psychiatrist.
Yeah. So let's talk about your videos. Because you have one, like I said before we jumped on and started recording, you've got to check Emma on Instagram, specifically TikTok, although I don't know if you do the same ones across both, but you are literally smashing it with the content, and it's obviously resonating with people, so much so that you had a TikTok video go completely viral last week, right?
Yeah, it's been a bit crazy. So this year I've just really felt that I need to get my message out there in different ways. So I've been trying the different platforms. Instagram, I probably post on the most. And TikTok, initially I thought it's all about down with the kids, but it's just not the case, actually. I found this amazing woman called Dr. Kim Hires who makes amazing content on burnout. So I was like, if she's doing it, I can do this, but with my own little flavour. Yeah. So there's something on TikTok called a duet, where someone's made a video and you can do your own response to it. So there's a famous TikToker who'd done something about burnout. So I thought, I'm going to duet with this and just talk about, he's pulling out the symptoms. What was my experience of those symptoms? And then went to bed one night. Next morning, 200,000 people had viewed it, and there were more comments than I could reply to. And it just felt like a big responsibility, actually, to support people, because they're obviously hurting at the moment, and just so many cases of people saying, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize this was a thing. I need to take it seriously. And I had an amazing message from someone in Italy the other day where they were saying, I watched some of your videos on TikTok. It made me realize I've got an issue. I've changed things at work. I'm getting mental health support, and just thank you. So that was amazing.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, it just shows, I think I even said to you like a couple of weeks ago, I watched one of your Instagram videos and you'd pointed out certain signs of burnout. And I honestly have to be really honest, I didn't know burnout was a thing until I met you, which, despite it even being like medically recognized, I still didn't know. I still just bucket everything as stress, I guess. So it just shows you like how many people you can really reach out to, like how much of an issue this really is, like within the workplace.
Yeah, and I think the really cruel thing about burnout is it hits some of the best employees. So it's the people who are high achievers who are doing amazing things. It's the people that so passionately care about the organization's purpose that they go all in. And it's the people that are going the extra mile for the customers, for their boss. it's the people that you want to protect that are hurting the most.
Yeah.
For those who don't know the signs of the burnout, for example, I don't know them. What are the signs?
Yeah, so there's lots of research on this. So the ones that you'll see talked about the most are physical and emotional exhaustion. So you're so tired that you're not able to get up in the morning. That's when it's got really bad. Mm-hmm. It's not the kind of exhaustion that you can sleep off with just one good night's sleep. And then the emotional side, you might be someone who's normally quite kind of steady state, but suddenly you're feeling so frustrated, you want to shout at people, or you're just crying for no reason, seemingly. That's a big sign of emotional exhaustion. Your emotions are just completely out of check to how you normally are. Another big one is you start to feel detached from your life. So you could be at work in meetings and you don't quite feel in the room, or suddenly you just don't feel the same connection with your work anymore. It's almost like you're numb inside. And that can also happen in family life as well. So perhaps you've always loved going out with your friends and suddenly that's not attractive. It just feels like another thing to do that's going to take your energy. And then another one is just that you no longer feel a sense of accomplishment because you're not achieving as much as you used to in the same amount of time, just because your whole system is slowing down through all of the stress. Mm-hmm. So they're the big ones. But other signs are things like your appetite's changing, and that can go either way. You might be eating more or eating less. Some people use drugs and alcohol to get through. So, for example, when I went to see the psychiatrist, one of his first questions to me was, what drugs were you taking to keep going at that level for so long? Which I was like, no, I didn't have any, but that's really common. People have just been pushing through tiredness by taking something artificial. So yeah, there's lots, and that's one of the things that makes it tricky. It can look different in different people.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think companies are not actually preventing this? Because by listening to you, my understanding is these kind of burnouts, they have actually an economic impact. I mean, it's impacting the bottom line of companies, because someone like you, they're losing someone like you who is a valuable employee. So why do you think, what's the reason companies, they're actually not preventing this before it actually happens?
Yeah, I think we're still in the cycle of awareness raising. And I do think the pandemic's helped raise awareness because it's become more of an issue. So there is a piece around, similar to all of us, we weren't aware of burnout at some point. So there needs to be education around that. It can also be the case that because it hits high performers and kind of people pleasers, they're not the type of people that open up necessarily that they're struggling. Mm-hmm. So you need really skilled managers who set safe environments where people feel secure opening up. So think of it with me. My boss probably didn't realize there was anything wrong because I didn't realize there was anything wrong. I hadn't had a conversation. Mm-hmm. So there was no opportunity to really fix it. So I think education is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Because just whenever I think I said this to you before, I know in the podcast, whenever I hear you talking about the symptoms of burnout, it's like a checklist. Like either I've been through that myself or I know somebody else that does. And I just think, wow, like this must be such a widespread, like systemic issue that I think people, they just aren't even aware, which is obviously why I really, really wanted to have you on the podcast, because I know most of our listeners are still, in the workplace, and this will hopefully help people. The more people that hear this. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your transition to entrepreneurship. You mentioned that, you obviously had those 6 months off work and you're focusing on recovering. But after that, you said, you saw there was an opportunity to do something for yourself, to be an entrepreneur, and you knew that was the thing. Why did you know that was the thing for you?
So I did a lot of self-discovery and personal development work in that time. And I realized, just with how I'm wired, I need to be in an environment where it's okay to go all in, because I I'm not very good at kind of just giving myself partially to what I'm focused on. I'm a bit all or nothing. So I realized that going back into the corporate environment, even if we put some boundaries in initially around phased return to work, the same thing was going to happen again. So that ruled off corporate for me. And I thought, frankly, if I'm not going back to the job that I was doing before, I don't really feel like starting with a new company, kind of coming out of this situation. Mm-hmm. So I was certain that I needed to have my own business. And I invested in some mentorship. I think I literally just saw an ad on Facebook that resonated with me, and talks about becoming a sales professional. So yeah, typical me, kind of jumped in. I loved learning on my own terms. So prior to that, any learning I did was always in a corporate curriculum situation, or was my university degree. So it felt really empowering to have paid for my own education and then suddenly be networking with people all across the world. So I loved that. And then initially started off just providing sales services as an individual to different companies, and then decided to create a team because I was getting more requests than I could service myself. And then I moved into more of running a sales agency model.
Yeah. And what was, I guess, in that first year of entrepreneurship, what was the best thing and then I guess, I don't want to say the worst thing, but the biggest challenge?
So the best thing for me was just having a sense of creating value from scratch. So I made this business from nothing, and kind of that first invoice that gets paid, there's something quite magical about that. So I really enjoyed the experience of building a business, learning something new. I've always been a learning addict, so it really appealed to that side of my personality. Probably the biggest challenge was initially I had kind of minor panic attacks about not having a salary and a benefits package anymore. That took me a little while to get my head around, because I just never really had to think about money before, because I always knew I was going to earn a set amount on a set day of the month. So that took a little bit of time for me to get used to. But then what I realized is, in the corporate world, you're relatively fixed in what you can earn. Yes, there might be some variable rewards, but they're always fixed. Whereas in the world of business, kind of you can build something as big as you want to, as long as you get the kind of right support, the right mentorship to do that. So I love that.
Yeah, that totally resonates with us for sure. So you mentioned then, so you did your sales agency, and then you've done some copywriting work, and then you had that like nagging in the back of your head that you had to do something related to burnout and make that your mission. What was it that held you back from doing that originally?
Yeah, so I had two moments where I felt a strong pull to do that. The first was just as I decided to become an entrepreneur. So I thought, this is something that I should do. But at the time, it just still felt a bit raw. Mm-hmm. And so as I was starting to do it, I knew the mechanics of setting up the business, but I just wasn't quite emotionally ready to give myself to that completely. So that was probably summer 2018. I felt like that, and then kind of went all in with the sales agency. That I ended up losing balance and kind of stepping away from that at the end of 2019, but on good terms. And then kind of floated around a bit doing copywriting, because it's easy to me. It's kind of what I've always done as an element of my corporate job. And it was really the pandemic that made me think that I was being selfish, because I kept reading articles about the struggles people were having. I saw it in my friends, just them struggling in different ways. And I was recognizing the signs of burnout in them before they recognized it themselves. So that was the point that I was like, I need to stop messing around with this. It's selfish. I just need to get over any issues I have about sharing my story and make it happen.
What was it about the pandemic specifically that has made burnout more prevalent?
So, yeah, there's different reasons. For some people, just being at home all the time, isolated, they're working more intensely. So some of the things that kept them well, potentially interacting with colleagues, getting emotions out over the water cooler, those coping mechanisms have gone. and they've got less boundaries between work and home because there's no commutes, there's no switch off time unless they engineer that. And for a lot of people, they're working in the same space as they're living, and that can tip the balance. It makes it really difficult to switch off from work if you're literally trying to relax in the same room that you've worked all day. That kind of creates a bit of a hangover. So that's a big one. Also, companies have had a tough time. They've laid people off. It's quite normal that people are covering 2 or 3 roles, and they're trying to do a great job of it because they care about the company, or they're worried about their own job security as well. So there is more prevalence of overwork as well. And some people find it really hard to open up remotely over a video call. So perhaps if you were in an office with someone, you might spot that they're working longer or they don't quite see themselves. It's more difficult to spot that in a virtual team environment.
And what would you say to these people? Like, if someone is listening to us right now and they're going through exactly ticking those boxes, what would you say to them?
Yeah, so I always look at it from 2 perspectives. What can the individual do? What can the company do?
Right.
So from an individual perspective, it's really figuring out what you need to stay healthy. So is it, rather than your morning commute, you need to go for a walk around the block? So it feels like there's some separation between this is home, this is work. Can you create a space at home that's separate from where you relax so that work doesn't hang over into the rest of your life? If you're in, say, a 1-room apartment, can you set up a workspace during the day and clear it away at 5, 6 o'clock, whatever time you want to make the boundary, so that it doesn't feel like you still have a desk at home? Can you set some boundaries around when you start and finish work? You don't have to hit them every day, but you need to hit them more times than not. If you find yourself emailing on your device on an evening, can you lock your phone away in a drawer or give it to your partner so you don't have that temptation? It's really figuring out what the triggers are for you and what is a systematic way of sorting that out. So for me, I still find it difficult to put my needs first. So I have actually got a dog so that it forces me to get out of the house, walk twice a day. That's a systematic way of making sure that I stay well. So yeah, I'd say those from an individual perspective. From a company perspective, it's never been more important to spread awareness of mental health. So companies that are progressive in this space will have some sort of well-being offer where they're educating employees about mental health matters. They might have an employee assistance line where people can just phone up if they're having a difficult time, speak to a professional outside of their team, get some really confidential support. That's important. It also means that leaders and managers need to be educated on how to have conversations with their team about mental health in a way that they inspire trust, even over a video call. So saying, "How are you?" it's not that effective. Saying things like, "How can I help you?" that's a bit more effective because you're changing the empathy into something more action focused. So there's lots of techniques, but the managers need support in terms of how to have those conversations and also what to look for in terms of signs of stress. So some companies go as far as doing little surveys with their employees, whether it's just 2 faces pop up on a Friday, or are you happy, sad, and that gives them some overall metrics on how people are feeling.
Yeah, nice. So what are the consequences if someone's listening and they feel like, you know, I feel like I'm ticking some of these boxes? What are the consequences if they don't do something about it, if they don't have an intervention? Intervention, that's the right word.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, an intervention. I guess I'm a good example. So for me, burnout ended my corporate career. It's ended up okay because I wanted to be an entrepreneur and that's worked. But essentially, it led to me having 6 months of not being able to work. I was lucky in that that was paid. Lots of people are on contracts where that's not the case. If that hadn't been the case, that I couldn't have got another job in that period. I wasn't physically well enough. And I'm pretty convinced that had I not had the medical support that I did to stabilize myself, I could have ended up in a really, really dark space, depression wise. So yeah, at its most serious, kind of people commit suicide. It's horrendous. So the earlier that you can spot the symptoms, the more in control of your recovery you are. If you spot them really early days, even putting some boundaries into your working day could see you continuing where you are now, or perhaps you have that conversation with your boss that gets you a week off where you can just reset, come back, start as you mean to go on.
Yeah. So obviously, extremely bad consequences in the very worst case scenario. I love your mission on LinkedIn. So maybe you could share, like, you obviously decided, that to do this is your calling or something you should do. What is your mission with as a burnout coach?
Yeah, so really I'm on a mission to spread awareness of burnout worldwide. So that's why I produce so much free content across platforms. And then the work that really lights me up is working with high-performing individuals who are on that trajectory to burnout and really helping them reprioritize, figure out what boundaries they need to have in place to have that sustained high performance. And then I also work with people who are coming out the other side. So maybe like me, they had the medical support that stabilized them, but they've lost their confidence. They're feeling a bit directionless. How do we get you feeling like the best version of yourself? So yeah, I love that one-on-one work.
Go on, you go.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was also to make a point that it's really nice when a situation that wasn't really good turns out to be, to push you in a situation that you actually want to help people. It's always positive when those things happen, and the impact that you can actually make in the world, the impact that you can actually make in other people's life, even though there's something bad happened a few years ago, but it's always something positive coming out from negative situations.
That's true, actually. And I don't know if it's an Oprah Winfrey quote around turning your wounds into wisdom that really resonated with me. And yeah, sometimes in your lowest moments, even just sharing your story helps other people, even if you're not fixed yet. Because frankly, or any of us, I will always have to work hard to make sure that I stay well and kind of get the right balance.
Yeah, because that was going to be a question I was going to ask you. We talked about the workplace, but now you're an entrepreneur, we're entrepreneurs, and I assume this is something that affects entrepreneurs as well, right? This isn't just specific to corporate.
Yeah, exactly. In some ways, as an entrepreneur, it's even harder because you've got that added motivation of everything you do financially benefits you as well. So that can push some people to work too hard at times. For other people, it's just they're living their passion every day. So they don't want to have boundaries around it. And boundaries don't always have to look like you work 9 to 5. So for me, I probably work a bit less each day, but I do work into the weekends. I just work with my energy a lot more now. And I've learned to recognize what the signs of stress are in me. So I've learned through trial and error that the first warning sign for me is one of my eyes will start twitching really annoyingly. And that's a sign that, no, stop, you've got to do something differently. Because if I ignore that, it then turns into pain in my side. And then I'll start getting really tired and not be as productive. So if I can just stop at the eye twitch, I'm fine the next day.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I just keep thinking about myself. I was like, oh my goodness, I used to get really bad stomach aches, like such bad stomach aches. So I'm always just like, this clearly affected me a lot. Do you feel like because you're, as an entrepreneur, you're chasing your passion, like it's different, right, from being in the corporate environment? You're working on your dreams rather than somebody else's. Do you feel in a way that kind of is a therapy as well, in a sense? The fact that your energies are just, I don't know, different. I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, I think the good thing about entrepreneurship for me is I'm my boss, so I'm in control of how much I work or not. There are definitely times where I want to do more and I'm having to pull myself back. But yeah, in sharing my story, it is quite therapeutic in a way. It's forced me to deal with things. And I'll be frank, there are some moments where I do a share on social media and it still hurts because it was a really difficult thing to go through. So there was a post I did recently and I literally had to go lie down afterwards. It was almost like I was back in that moment as I was writing the caption, but that's something I needed to process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know what? Like, I think these kind of messages and these kinds of businesses are the ones that can really, when it makes you feel like that, like that means that the message is so powerful that people just have to hear it. Do you ever wish that you had started your journey as an entrepreneur earlier, or are you very grateful, I guess, for all of the crap that you went through? I don't know, like.
Yeah, I'm not a big one for having regrets. It's just my mind's more future focused, which is actually something I've had to work on more, kind of live in the moment rather than thinking ahead. It took me a while to get to the point that I could say that I'm grateful for burnout, but I am now, because I think had that not happened, I would have been that person in the corporate world that probably has a heart attack in their 40s, 50s, and is on their deathbed saying, why did I spend so long in the office? I was neglecting my family, I was neglecting my friends. By the time I got home on an evening, my husband Steve was asleep. I was up before he was awake in the morning. So it's not a great way to live. So yeah, it's good that burnout made me stop and reassess. But I'm a firm believer that you can learn that lesson in a way that's less extreme. And that's my wish for everybody else. I don't wish that experience on anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in terms of how you work with people, so you talked a little bit about that. So yeah, I mean, like, tell us a little bit more about how, like, specifically you help, and if you have programs or anything like that, or.
Yeah, so alongside everything that I share on social media is general awareness raising. I will work with a small number of women predominantly on a one-on-one basis for 12 weeks to really take that from that point of they're feeling burnt out to coming out the other side, being really clear on what they want from life, feeling more confident in having boundaries, and just not seeing burnout as a necessary step on the path to success. And that journey looks different for everybody, because the women who come to work with me are all at different stages. Some of them are spotting the signs early, so it's much easier to get them to the point that they're feeling better, but actually there's still work to do on boundaries. For other people, if they've been through the medical system with burnout, quite often you come out the other side feeling like you've completely lost your confidence in yourself, sense of self. So that requires a different type of inner work and coaching to really just feel confident in what you're about again, and to trust yourself as well. That's the other thing. People often feel that they've almost let themselves down, and which is rubbish. Actually, if you've got to the point of pushing yourself that hard that you're in burnout, you are someone that is a high achiever. Most people wouldn't actually physically be able to push themselves that far.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. Everyone's journey looks a little bit different, and it just takes time as well. That's the other thing. I think the biggest message that I give to people is it just takes time, but you have to celebrate every little bit of progress, because that builds up over time. So I went from kind of getting out of bed, getting washed, getting dressed was a big thing in the early stages. And then I've got to the point that not that long ago, I spoke on a stage in front of 1,000 people about burnout. I never would have thought that was possible, but you do it through consistent action and celebrating success along the way.
Yeah. You said something there that just caught my attention when you talked about, it was kind of a mindset thing, that people who are on that way up to success, maybe they think that this is normal, or think that you have to get yourself to that point. I know that I believe that this is more of probably like a societal thing, but you think to get to a certain level of success, whether it be in entrepreneurship or in the workplace, that you basically have to kill yourself to get there, right?
Yeah, and it's just not sustainable, because maybe you can push yourself like that in your 20s, into your early 30s. Eventually it catches up with you. And actually, probably the later it catches up with you, the more severe the symptoms are going to be. If you start to experience that in your 40s, they're the kind of people that have heart attacks at their desk in the office. And you only have to look at some of the countries in Asia, and it's a real thing that people just drop down dead from overwork. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. But, you know, with people like you, like spreading this message on social media, like hopefully this is something that can change and people will start to recognize those signs to be able to make the changes that they need to save themselves, really.
Yeah, and it makes good business sense, because if you can keep your top performers well, they're going to work more sustainably, they're going to deliver more results for the organization. Someone who's working 24/7 is not being productive.
Yeah. It's like when you can measure, like for companies, they have a lot of people off sick. It's not about blaming the employees for being off sick. It's about what's going on here. That means we've got lots of employees off sick, and then fixing that, because at the end of the day, you need your employees in the office. So
exactly. Yeah, you've just got to ask why these things are happening.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have another question?
I have the final question.
Perfect. So Alvaro always asks this one question at the end of every podcast interview.
Yeah. So let's assume that there is no COVID, so you can actually travel freely around the world. Where would you go and why?
Ooh. So I have my sights set on a holiday to Jamaica with some friends. So I was really lucky. Just before lockdown in the UK, I was in Barbados celebrating a friend's wedding, and we got back just as lockdown was coming in. And we promised that we'd, for their 1 year anniversary, we'd go to Sandals in Jamaica and have an amazing time. And of course, that hasn't happened. So that's high up on the list of when we're able to travel. Just go to paradise, complete relaxation, and that will be amazing.
Yeah, I think after this year, that's what we all need, is just to like kick off our sandals on the beach and just lie in the sun, right?
Yeah, Jamaica sounds good for the burnout.
Yeah,
it's just so relaxed, and don't worry, be happy. I love that culture. It's not me, but it's a good thing for me to experience every now and again.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that, right? Just chill time. Well, Emma, thank you so much for joining us for our podcast. There was so much valuable information in there. And if somebody wants to get in touch with you to find out more about you, how can they do that? Where can they find you? Yeah,
so I'm on Instagram at Emma Matthews Coaching, or you can go to my website, defeatburnout.com, which has got loads of articles about burnout. You can sign up to the email list as well, where you'll get notified when new content goes out. Okay, perfect. And TikTok, right? I'm also on TikTok, same handle as Instagram, at Emma Matthews Coaching, so you can't escape.
everywhere. Perfect. Well, Emma, thank you so much. And for those of you that want those links, we will drop them into the notes. You'll be able to find them attached to this episode. Emma, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of There Is Another Way, a podcast designed for the 85% of you that are unhappy in your 9-to-5 jobs to know what else is out there. Thank you.